everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being online. Thank you for listening. I am Pooja Agarwal. I'm the COO over at Flatiron School, and I'm so excited today we get to sit down with our CEO, Kate Cassino.
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here with you, Pooja.
I feel like we are going to have a lot to talk about today.
I think so.
So today we're going to talk about leadership and more specifically, some of the winning habits you've learned over the last 20 years in your career and why they're important.
Wow, you had to say 20 years, Pooja? Calling that out right off.
We just want people to know the depth of your experience. So often when we have people in leadership giving talks, they often talk about what they do. I think what will be really helpful for all of us is to actually focus on how you did and continue to do the work you're doing. Things like, how can you be a great employee? What skills or attitudes do you need to develop to advance your career? And how can you make sure your job is satisfying and fulfilling? So let's start with the first question. If somebody offers you an amazing opportunity, but you are not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it later. Richard Branson said this in one of his most popular quotes. And your first winning habit is always raise your hand. Can you explain why that's so important?
Yes, happy to. So that's actually one of my favorite winning habits of all 5 that I'll kind of go through with you today. Let me take you back to the beginning of my career and take you on a little bit of a tour of why that's such an important kind of habit of mine. I graduated college from Barnard College here in the great city of New York. I was a double major, English and education. Always had a passion for education and a love for instruction. And also just recognized pretty early on that I was very fortunate to have been given a great childhood education. And so wanted the opportunity to kind of give back in that arena. And so I decided to pursue my teaching certification and ended up teaching in the New York City public school system. Phenomenal experience, got such a great appreciation for both the intellectual and emotional toll of being a teacher in the classroom. Loved that time, but recognized that my skills were better suited outside of the classroom. So after college, decided to pursue a job in education publishing as a way of kind of still staying in the category and continuing to kind of challenge myself in utilizing my skills in this particular field. So worked at Prentice Hall for a little while, which is now part of Pearson, and then made my way over to McGraw-Hill. And at McGraw-Hill, I was asked to join what was called the Corporate Affairs Group. And Corporate Affairs was responsible for things like investor relations, corporate communications, internal communications. And I was in this department with probably 40 other people, all of whom had many, many years of experience and service, right, in that group. And I was trying to figure out, how am I ever, with all of my 1-year experience right out of college in this department, going to figure out how to really make a path for myself? How am I going to be differentiated? There is always going to be so many people in front of me with so much more experience. One day we had a meeting, and our department head, the head of corporate affairs, got us in this conference room. We're sitting around this table, and I'll date myself here. So this was mid-90s. And the conversation was around the internet. And the conversation was, and hold on to your chairs, it was, there's this thing called the internet, and a lot of companies have these websites. And here we are, McGraw-Hill, we don't have a website, right? So we should probably do something about that. Who in the room can help us figure out, how do we launch a website? And as you can imagine, right, people around the table kind of looked at each other, and everyone's overworked. Everyone's got a lot to do. And so the first instinct was to kind of put your head down and hope that the person who was leading the meeting wasn't going to make eye contact and ask you to kind of go and figure out how to do this. Maybe it was a little bit of ignorance, just being young and early in my career. Maybe it was a little bit of courage that I didn't have much to lose. But something in me made me kind of raise my hand, and I volunteered to look into and figure out, how would we launch a website. It was a little scary. It was definitely kind of a moment of, like I said, a combination of ignorance and maybe bravery. But I was able to go and talk to all of my good friends who were computer science majors at Barnard College and beg them to teach me, what do I need to do to code a website? And lucky for me, back then, those websites were placeholder pages. I'm looking at the audience here, and everyone's going to be too young to remember this, but they were literally like, about us, who you are, who we are, our products, our services, really simple. And I taught myself how to do some HTML coding, and I came up with this, 5-page website, and that gave me this finally something unique and different that distinguished me amongst those other colleagues within that department. So my advice is always raise your hand, right? Be a problem solver. So here was the department head who had all sorts of, he needed someone to take this on. I didn't necessarily know how to do it, but I figured I'd bet on myself to go figure it out. Wanted to help him solve a problem, make a name for myself, and try and apply a skill that was unique and different that gave me kind of status, if you will, and recognition in the group. So always raise your hand.
Can we talk what a full circle moment that is, where you learned to HTML code and now you're the CEO of Flatiron School?
It's pretty crazy.
I didn't even expect that to be the story that comes out there. So, so in some companies, and I can see this more in larger companies, often employees can feel like they're a cog in the wheel, and it's hard for them to really connect to goals in a company. And one of your winning habits is to align yourself with the goals in a company. Can you explain how this habit helped you in your career and how it can be impactful to really find out the goals of a company?
Sure. No, this is also one that, I really took to heart. So kind of continuing on my journey. So I was in this, once I had coded the website, the McGraw-Hill gave me a small, quote unquote, team of web designers and HTML coders. At the time, you were called a webmaster, which would never fly these days, but web mistress doesn't fly either. So neither would have been appropriate. Exactly. But it was the new media function. So we were responsible for, the intranet site, the external website, and, kind of digital media throughout the business. But what I came to recognize was that McGraw-Hill, like many educational publishers at the time, and we continue to see to this day, we're on this journey to migrate from being a print-based business to a digital business. And they were trying to figure this out, right? And there's all sorts of, news being written about companies that needed to make this transition as more and more, moved online to the internet. And what I found was that, again, people in the organization grew up in that organization doing it a certain way, right? We're at that kind of an interesting inflection point now too. When you think about certain things we were doing in, a pre-pandemic world and now in a post-pandemic world, same idea. You need to be aware of what's happening long-term and what those transitions are, so that you can ride kind of the wave of where the company is going. And so at that time, I really spent time learning about things like web analytics and search engine marketing and search engine optimization and e-commerce. Those were all things that, those were all the things that were being written about, businesses were grappling with, and became really a student of what those were all about. And so as the business was evolving, I became, a little bit of a subject matter expert that was tapped to help think through that print to digital move. And so my next role was when the head of our function at the time moved over to another part of McGraw, where he oversaw 6 different information media businesses. And at the time, it was brands like Business Week, JD Power and Associates, a couple of ABC affiliate broadcast stations, Platts, which is in the oil business, an aviation business, and a construction data business. So he was overseeing all of those, and all of those different businesses and those different sectors all were going through this whole print to digital kind of transformation. And I was able to join him in working with those businesses, getting to know a little bit about all of those verticals, which makes me a lot of fun at a cocktail party, because a little bit of oil, a little bit of construction. But it was a great time, and it was really all about all got there from making sure that I was understanding where the business was going and trying to keep my skill set aligned to it. great way to make sure you always have a job.
That one really resonates with me. I feel like we talk about this a lot all the time at work, is like, how do you make sure you're rowing in the same direction as everybody? Because if you're going in a different direction, that's not great.
That's right.
Stand out pretty quickly in the wrong way.
That's right.
So your third habit is don't be afraid to try new things. This is really appropriate given that many of our students, for the most part, are trying new things. And we just need to point out, right, there's an overwhelming majority of those students that use both their non-tech skills along with their prior experience, along with their new skills that they've learned to land a new career in tech. So how did you use this habit, and why is it so important to career growth?
Yes. So trying new things, scary and daunting for all of us. And I've certainly had a few of those opportunities to be kind of jolted throughout my career. But I will say 9 out of 10, almost all 10, when I tried something new, ended up with a positive. So kind of continuing on my journey as I spent time doing this kind of print to digital transformation role at McGraw across those 6 businesses. I recognize that in order for me to continue to evolve my skill set, I wanted to actually work at a specific business unit and have a real P&L responsibility. So responsibility for all of the finances, day-to-day operations of the company. So really wanted to move into a specific business. And I thought the way to do that was to network with the CEOs of the different businesses I was already interfacing with in my prior role, and kind of, see if there was an opportunity for me to find a role within their respective business. So I got really excited one day when the CEO of Platts, a woman at the time, tapped me and said, Kate, love your experience, like your energy. I have an idea of an opportunity for you at Platts. And I thought, wow, this is great. I networked. She wants me to come join. And Platts was minting money. I think they still do, actually. Money over money. They were just a great product, great category, did really well. So I thought, fantastic. I'll jump into this business, and I'm going to learn a ton, and I'll continue to progress in my career. And then I got a call from HR, Human Resources, and they said, we heard you were talking to Victoria about going over to Platts. We're not going to let you do that. And I was like, I'm sorry, right? I just found my own new path over here, right? There shouldn't be a problem. And they're like, no. We actually have a different plan of where we would like to put you next. So, okay, all right, maybe this will be interesting. And they turned to me and said, we're going to put you in our construction data business. And I was like, what? And just to give you some context, this was 2008. And as all of you remember, maybe you guys will remember, 2008 was the height of the financial crisis, right? So this was the worst commercial construction crisis in the United States in over 50 years, right? And this business was all focused on pulling together information on new construction activity happening in the US and then selling it back to contractors and building product manufacturers. So it was a struggling business. So they said to me, look, you're going to learn more in a business that's struggling than you will in one that's growing. And, if we can throw you in the deep end here and you can do well, you're going to get, so much out of it. So I was a little annoyed at first. I was scared too, because a business that's highly disrupted at the time was nerve-wracking. And then on top of that, they wanted to put me in as a CIO. So they wanted me to take kind of my digital background that I had acquired through a couple of those roles I had just spoken about, and use that to help them organize a more, I'd say, business-focused technology organization that allowed them to kind of go through this transformation of kind of print to digital. So one, I was moving into a business that, was not in great shape. And two, I wasn't sure I had all the requisite skills to be successful. But I did. I jumped in, and I was fortunate that I had a great support network and great teammates that wanted to work with me. I owned when I didn't know something. I chose to acknowledge and kind of lean on their expertise, which they really appreciated. And together as a management team, we were able to really turn that business in a way that was incredibly successful. So I kind of go back to, don't be afraid, right? Kind of jump in there. There's a lot of, even though it seems daunting, there's some great experiences that can come out of it.
I love that. I think one thing that inspires me, and I know all of us all the time, is the courage that we see from our students every day,
Yes.
right? To see these people who've never tried anything in the tech field and to come in and say, I'm going to have the courage to do something new and fail and work really hard. I mean,
Absolutely.
what a habit.
Absolutely.
So the next one, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes is better than a master of one. That's for those of you who maybe haven't heard the entire saying, because we really just always say the first part. Your fourth habit speaks to this little bit. It's focus on building skills. What role did this habit have in furthering your career?
Yes. So, continuing on my trajectory. So I was CIO, as I mentioned, for about a year, working with that group, and there was a leadership change. So my boss, who was president of the group, moved on, and they brought someone new in. And this individual was a bit more interested in having someone with a traditional kind of technology background in the seat that I was in. So he wanted to move me over into a product development role. And I remember being, humbled, disappointed, maybe a little embarrassed, because I felt like I was going from a C-level technology. It seemed like it had all this cachet, into like a VP of product, which is still, an amazing role. But I don't know, I guess my ego got in the way, and kind of the image of, did it seem like I was kind of being downgraded, was what kind of came top of mind. But I stuck with it because actually I loved, and even more than kind of my previous role, the job of someone in product, right? In product is kind of that whole hub and spoke model. Product sits in the center. You have the opportunity to work with the technology team, the sales team, the marketing team, understand customer needs. So there's so much in it that was exciting for me to pursue. And the skills that I would learn right in that role were so important for my development. So I had to get out of my own way, not chase the title, right? Because we all, have a little bit of ego and like to chase those titles, and instead focus on building the skills that I was attaining in this new product role. And I had a blast. We ended up we pivoted the business from being kind of a lead generation business to one that focused on data and analytics. And 3 of the products I launched, which I think will be kind of near and dear to all of you with my team, was around kind of mining data that sat in a number of our repositories in our SaaS-based platform, and serve it up to identify relationships between key players in the construction industry, and also extract like the name brands of certain building products that we then used as leads for architects and engineers. And so it was a phenomenal opportunity to really apply data and analytics kind of early in the day of when that all sounded really exciting and interesting to do, which it still is. And it was a great place for me to learn a lot of new skills. And so don't chase the titles. Remember, anyone's read the Sheryl Sandberg book. It's, your career isn't a ladder. It's actually a jungle gym, right? You're constantly moving, sometimes sideways, sometimes up, sometimes down. But as long as you're acquiring the skills that will allow you to be a well-rounded leader over time, that's more beneficial than any kind of title that anyone's going to give you.
I'm just going to pause for a second as a reminder. If you want, you can also submit questions to be answered. Just scan the QR code and fill out the Google form. Okay, so your last and final rule is probably the most important. Mm-hmm. And anyone can and should do it at any stage of their career. And that is advocate for yourself. After all you've accomplished to this point in your career, how did advocating for yourself help? And almost maybe more importantly, what did it look like?
Yes. So now I've shared with you kind of my journey, right? So we just left off. I was heading up product development. During that time, we had launched 3 products. We ended up within the first year of those launches, we had like $30 million recurring revenue. It was a big transformational change for this business that had been struggling. So I thought when I learned that the CEO of our business was moving on, that if they were going to replace him, right, I figured I was definitely in the running, right? I had been CIO for the business. I had headed our product development. And also during this time, which I didn't mention, I also had an opportunity to run inside sales. And then earlier in my career at McGraw, right, was in corporate affairs, had this digital background, had done some marketing. So I was like, wow, I've done pretty much every functional area, right, that could be represented, and many of them within the function that the business that I was currently in. So of course they're going to tap me and say, would you be interested in taking this role? And no one was more shocked than me when I found out through the grapevine that they were looking outside to bring someone in to, backfill this CEO who had left. And I remember just being like, I can't get over they didn't tap me. Like I was just dumbfounded by the whole thing. And then it kind of dawned on me, people tend to put everyone in boxes. We make assumptions, right, about one another. We don't necessarily mean to, but we all do. And at that time, I had 2 young children. And I think there was just this assumption that, oh, Kate's not going to want to do that, right? That's going to be so much more work. There's, there may be longer hours, going to be travel involved. She's got young kids. And to their defense, I had not gone out of my way to make sure that everyone knew that my intentions were to continue to evolve. And I really did want to be in a leadership role. So, while a little bit was, some, kind of just assumptions that folks made, yes, but I also didn't go out of my way to make sure that I was articulating to everyone that I could, this is the vision I have for myself. As these opportunities present themselves, I'd like to be considered. I had not done that. And to my pleasant surprise, once I did realize, wow, I need to go tell people this, I was, very quickly in the running, and they were happy that I threw my hat in the ring, and I ultimately became the CEO of that business. So, and then I was asked to actually sell that business on behalf of McGraw-Hill to a private equity firm, which I did. Also had this great experience of selling a business, which is also back to building skills, something that you want to make sure you're doing. But it all came from making sure that I was telling my story about what I wanted, right, and not assuming that anyone knew what it was that I wanted. So I think kind of that continuous messaging is so important. I say this to people that I lead all the time. I don't care how great a manager you are. There's a lot of people on your team that you're thinking about. It would be, a false thing to say that I wake up every morning and think of Pooja, right? Do I think of Pooja? Absolutely. But I also think of the other 9 other people who report to me. I think of the, 400 people in the company. I'm thinking of my family, right? You're thinking of so many things that you just have to make sure you are clear with your voice and making the time, and don't make assumptions.
That's great. Should we get other people involved
in
this question
please.
Situation? All right. So this is really the moment of truth for me if I can figure out how to operate this. Great. Okay, I got there. All right. First question. Are there any books that have resonated with you as your career has progressed that you could recommend for women just getting started in the tech sector?
That is a good question. I did like the Lean In book, the Sheryl Sandberg book. I thought that was good. Am I saying it right? Lean In. It was Lean In, right? I did enjoy that, and I think just her perspective of kind of navigating, right, the whole world was, from the lens of a female leader, was really effective. So I think that was one. And then a more kind of general kind of management books, as Pooja knows. I have my team reading the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Great book. And the other one I would say from a leadership, just general leadership, The Gifted Boss. Those would be my top 3.
Can I add one to your list?
Yes, please.
I would add one that is really unexpected. It's called Daring Greatly by Brené Brown.
Oh,
it is
yes.
Not a business book, but it's the whole idea of vulnerability and putting yourself out there. And I feel like for a lot of the habits you talked about today, it's how do you just sort of put yourself out there?
Absolutely. So that's a good ad.
Maybe it's not in the business book section. All right. Next question. If you could go back in time to talk to yourself at the start of your career, what would you tell yourself? What would you do differently?
I think I would tell myself to have a little more confidence. I think I was always under the impression that everyone knew so much more than I did for the longest time. And then as you kind of progress, you realize there's a lot of folks who are kind of, the expression fake it till you make it, right? There is a little bit of, I don't know. I just assumed everyone had this great, instruction manual that told them exactly what to do, and that someone just didn't give me a copy and I was trying to figure it out along the way. But in reality, no one has that, right? And everyone is figuring it out along the way. And you should bet on yourself, right? And I think if I had said that to myself earlier in my career, maybe I would have taken some different choices. But I have definitely gotten there, and I do bet on myself now. And I encourage you guys to do that too.
I like this one. During your stories, you mentioned a few moments where you networked and asked for help from people that had familiarity with subjects you were new to. So networking must be really important. Do you have any networking advice for someone new to the tech field?
So, yes. So networking is one of those things that it's so uncomfortable for many people, and myself included, right? Everyone's busy. You don't feel like, you're wasting someone's time when you kind of knock on their door and you're asking them for something. But if you step back for a minute and think about it, most people really appreciate it when you ask them for their expertise on something. They like to talk about things that they're passionate about and that they do well and that they're good at. And if you give them a forum to do that where you're really listening to it, they actually enjoy it. So my experience has been, really go out of your way to push yourself out of the comfort zone. I used to hide behind email a lot. Like I would send a note, well, it'd be great if we got together for coffee, right? And it's passive. Pick up the phone. I know no one does that anymore, but it's really effective. And just get, that live voice and say, hey, I'd love to pick your brain on XYZ. 9 out of 10 times when I've done it, people are more than happy to, and they're excited that you're passionate about something that they're good at and that they're passionate about too. So it's a nice way to connect and get to know each other and build out your arsenal of people that you can tap anytime you need help.
So you're telling us that phones do more than just text.
They do.
Is what I'm
They
hearing.
do. I'm a big fan of the phone.
One of the things our career coaches always tell me, because they focus a lot on how you can network and really go forward in a job search, is always like, how do you also give something back potentially to the person you talk to, whether it's you just follow up and you send an interesting article or something, but that way you don't feel like you're just taking. And that one always resonated with me too, is like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, people also want to learn and continue to learn. That was such a good.
That's a good feedback.
Interesting one. What is your opinion on pursuing higher education, like a master's, to aid in your career in tech?
That's a good question too. I'd say it's something that I'm torn on. I think it's very specific to what it is that you're looking to accomplish. I think I've been fortunate in that. Individuals that I've worked with, and even some of the things that I did early on, a lot of the hands-on experience was valued a bit more in certain roles. That's not to say that, continuing education is always a positive, but figuring out exactly what it is that you're going to be doing and then assessing based on that, right? So I think the opportunity to be immersed in, training like we have at Flatiron is a great way to, in a short period of time, hopefully, kind of get some of the pragmatic skills that you're going to need to apply in a real world job. I know some higher institutions certainly offer things along those lines too, but I'd be just, be deliberate in determining whether or not you need that for the type of role you're looking to go after. So I think it's highly dependent on that.
So as a follow-up to that, let's talk about a specific role. We got a question in. I am transitioning from a 9-year career as a teacher. Okay. I would like to eventually find my way into UX design with an ed tech company. I am currently self-learning. Is it feasible that with no official degree in tech that I would be able to make this transition?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would definitely say I would encourage you to, take advantage of programs like we have here. But in general, I think it's not required these days for certain roles, especially in that particular area, that there is a kind of a 4-year degree or a master's behind it. So, but I think immersing yourself into organizations that will give you those pragmatic skills that you can then apply is really important.
You touched on this one a little bit when you talked about the advice that you would give to your younger self. But where do you get the bravery to take on these challenges? Did it come naturally to you, or was it acquired over time?
Yeah, I think as I was admitting, it was probably a little bit of ignorance / bravery, right? I think, it really came from feeling strongly. I always felt passionately that I wanted to be distinct. I didn't want to be part of the pack. That I would say is probably something that maybe was somewhat inherent, maybe that leadership attribute. And that's maybe what gave me a little bit of the incentive to raise my hand or put myself in some of these scarier situations. So it was, I think, came probably from there.
Seeing how you can contribute and align with a company, can you ask a company in an interview what their 1, 5, and 10-year goals are?
Ooh, yes. I would actually encourage you to. I think most companies, I'd say they should be able to tell you 1 and probably 5. 10 might be a little harder, but to certainly inquire in any organization that you're joining, what is it you're trying to achieve over time? I'd ask that of the hiring manager. I'd ask of the person from human resources. I'd make sure it aligns with the website and any collateral that the company is putting together, and try and internalize it for you. Do you see yourself being part of what that vision could be? Are you excited by it? Do you think you can apply the skills that you have, or you're excited about learning the skills that will allow you to have an impact on that business? That's where I think everyone's inner energy, certainly mine, comes from. If you can align yourself to something, then it's not just a job, right? It's a place where you're actually getting personal fulfillment, and also hopefully, professional skill development that allows you to continue to grow. And that's what makes coming to work fun.
I can vouch for Kate in this one. I feel like the first time I met Kate in our first conversation, she already knew about all of the business goals, and I was like, how do you know all this? Did you start and I just didn't know? But clearly you really lived by that because you knew.
Yeah.
So here's another good question. Coming from an English education background, what kind of challenges did you face in your transition, and how did you overcome them? What resources did you pull on?
Yeah. No, great question. So I would say, a couple things. Any background, any skills that you've acquired are good skills. They may not be as relevant for the next thing you're looking for at that particular time, but you will use it. And there's always an opportunity for you to, I would say, create a different narrative or around the skills that you have to align them to the job that you're looking for. So here I was an English major, right? But if you think about what an English major does, you're reading, right? You need to synthesize information. You need to be able to write papers, which means you have to clearly articulate a position, right? And you need to be able to public speak, right? Those are big pieces. You start to kind of reverse engineer that when you talk about job opportunities. I'm a critical thinker. I can organize data very quickly. I can synthesize information. I can effectively communicate, right? All those things take it out of being a English major, liberal arts, what are you going to do with your degree in Shakespeare, to, right, here are some skills that I actually learned in that major that apply in the real world. And just as a little aside, there was a study done, and there's I forget what the exact stat was, but a disproportionate amount of CEOs are English majors because of exactly what I just articulated. So look at that.
You talked about going out of your way in the workplace. How can women professionals do this without being taken advantage of?
What was it again? Sorry, Pooja, give that to me one more time.
You talked about going out of your way in the workplace. How can women professionals do that without being taken advantage of?
So going out of your way, right, in terms of putting yourself out there, or?
My assumption in this one is taking on more.
Okay.
And really like the idea of raising your hand to take on new initiatives.
Yes. So, it's always a fine line between, wanting to to stand out and be kind of the team player, the utility player. I think I had that on one of my slides, and I probably didn't even speak to that. But being too boastful or too out there, which maybe is a little bit what the comments around. I think it's all about being that utility player, right? How can you be the person that no matter what's happening, you can play a position on the field? So, my son is a baseball player, and people are always asking him, what position do you play? What position do you play? And he is that kid. And there's, certain kids with this athletic ability who can play, and he's got a good arm. So they put him at first base. That means they also put him at third base. He can run really fast and chase the ball. So they put him in the outfield. He actually can catch. So sometimes they have him behind home plate. He's that utility player. So I would say, make sure that you're positioning yourself that way as that utility player so that you can volunteer and raise your hand to take on different things to help any manager solve a problem. I will tell you as a manager, right, there's people who come to me on a regular basis, Pooja too, right? They'll either, any of your direct reports, they either put a brick on your desk and they say, here's a problem, or they come to you with options of how to solve something and then just ask for you to help them think it through. You always want to be the person who's coming with the options that you're getting feedback to, and not the brick. So to the extent that, you can be that well-rounded player who's problem solving, and raising your hand, I think you can take on more, and that's what kind of gets you that opportunity to stand out.
I think we're at our oh no, we have a couple more. So many questions. This is awesome. What was your biggest challenge navigating in a male-dominated industry, and how can women in these spaces support each other?
Ooh, great question. So yes, very male-dominated industry that I participated in, and to some degree due to this day. I would say, there's a great quote from Madeleine Albright, which is, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. So, which I love. And it's very true, right? It's find the other female leaders who are there, who you can bond with. Men do this incredibly well. Women, not always as effectively, but I think we're getting better. And use them as a source of strength and as a mentor to really help develop kind of your skill and be that support network for you. With that said, there's also a lot of incredible men who I also partnered with who were phenomenal in recognizing that there wasn't quite the representation that we need of females in the workplace, and were advocates and great mentors and supporters of me as well. But I think it's both those things.
I love that. I think one of the biggest things I think Kate does, and I'm really grateful a lot of women leaders do, is they do lead now, right? If you can see it, you can be it.
Right.
And so I love that advice. So now I really think we are at our last question. Lastly, and now the pressure's on because you already shared one. What's a quote that you live by?
I would say plan your work and work your plan is one of my favorites. I do believe that we all get easily overwhelmed. And sometimes you just step back, map it out, chunk it up, you'll get it done. And so anytime, and that's even when my professional and personal life kind of collide. That's one. I'm trying to think. Should I leave it at one?
This is your show. You do as many as you want.
I'd say my other one that I live by, those who are given much, much is expected. And so I do think as you ascend in your kind of, leadership, it is your duty, your obligation to also kind of pay that forward for everybody else. So back to the women helping women, and just being a good leader in general, right? Be the role model that, be the person that you'd like to work for one day. And that's a big part of, I think, how you continue to evolve and how we get a good brand as female leaders in tech.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kate. And thank you all for coming and being in person. I can't believe we're back in person.
So exciting.
And thank you for watching online. Thank you for listening. We hope you found this super helpful. For anyone who's interested in speaking to admissions, we'll be sending out some communications along with the recording of the event.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.